We have work to do.
In today's video, we will be looking at Saruman and what his self-given title of Ringmaker truly means.
Build me a throne worthy of Mordor.
When Gandalf recounts the story of the One Ring to Frodo after years of mysterious comings and goings, checking here and there on Frodo's health, never staying long and never saying much, we eventually learn the cause for his concern. That the One Ring, the Ring of Sauron, had returned, and it was right before his eyes. First coming to Bilbo before being passed on to Frodo, his heir, taken in as a tween after his parents drowned. What Gandalf conveys is that all he had was a suspicion, but that was nothing compared to the knowledge of Saruman, the head of his order and the master of all ring lore. Saruman convinced Gandalf that the One Ring was lost, at the bottom of the sea, but the shadow which fell on Gandalf's heart insisted that this was wrong. How wrong it was he could not know until Saruman betrayed him and their mission at Orthanc. In today's video we are going to look at Saruman the Ringmaker, a name he gave himself, and the rings of Isengard. First of all, it needs to be said that Isengard, and the larger structure of which is at its centre, Orthanc, was not created by or for Saruman, but rather by the Númenóreans in exile after the downfall of Númenor and their coming to Middle-earth in Gondor and Arnor. Isengard was built between 3320 of the Second Age and the time of the War of the Last Alliance in 3430. It was in the northwest of the Kingdom of Gondor and was purposed as a guard to the Fords of Isen, and as such was gifted to Saruman the White by the steward of Gondor, Beren, thinking the wizard would be a strong ally and buffer against the threat of the Dunlendins, who, as people, were in constant conflict with Rohan, and so with their ally of Gondor as well. Saruman was intended to be a steward of Orthanc, not its master, much in the same way the stewards of Gondor were guards for and not heirs to the royalty that they kept vacant until such a time a king should return and prove worthy. We can make some interesting comparisons between the steward of Gondor at the time of the War of the Ring, Denethor, and Saruman himself. Denethor, who told his son when asked that 10,000 years would not be sufficient enough time for a steward to take power as king in such a land as Gondor. Saruman was less scrupulous than Denethor though. Here we are talking about a man who went mad and attempted to set himself and his son on fire. The difference between them goes even further, however. For example, while Saruman was corrupted through his intention with Sauron through the Palantiri, Denethor waged a war of wills against the Dark Lord for nigh on 30 years before he broke, and when he broke, he still did not turn to the side of Sauron. Despite losing his critical faculty and despairing of all hope, he never turned to evil. As for Saruman, we know that he acted as though he was on Sauron's side, though he was desperately seeking out the ring for himself. When the Nazgul pass by Orthanc and they encounter Grima, Saruman speaks to their very thought and tells them that he knows what they are looking for. And though, if he had it, he tells them, he would not need to say so. Rather, they would throw themselves at his feet and name him Lord. This speaks to Saruman's ultimate aspirations, and not least of all his aspiration to own the One Ring itself, but to forge the rings of power of his own sorcery and lore, all of which in his new home of secrecy and power, Orthanc. Saruman refers to himself as Ringmaker, and we are unwilling to trust the word of a known traitor and liar. We can trust Gandalf, who notes on numerous occasions that Saruman is wearing a ring. It is Gandalf who recounts the series of events from which the name Saruman of Many Colours originated. But I rode to the foot of Orthanc, and came to the stair of Saruman, and there he met me and led me up to his high chamber. He wore a ring on his finger. I am Saruman the Wise, Saruman Ringmaker, Saruman of Many Colours. Now remember, it was Gandalf who told us that his intuition was nothing against the stature of Saruman in his studies of ring lore, as he had long studied what was his domain of study, while Gandalf had only an inclination, and in such a position he did not think just intuition was enough to go against the head of his order, as Gandalf was an honourable and noble spirit. Not exactly words that one would use to describe Saruman, whether he be white or many-coloured. It is possible that what Gandalf sees on Saruman's finger was a taunt, a feint, a way to convey strength that is purely illusionary. In keeping with the powers of his voice, he attempts to use at several times in the story, most prominently against Theoden, when their company rise to Isengard after the Battle of Helm's Deep. Theoden is able to shrug off Saruman's attempts at undermining Gandalf and his position, but only just, and only after Theoden's men begin murmuring in agreement with Saruman among themselves. It is in keeping with Saruman's character that he would wear a ring without powers as a means of conveying power, just as he was to proclaim himself no longer Saruman the White, but Saruman of many colours. He was not satisfied with his lot and intended to increase his power at whatever price. Treason, murder, whatever it took, he intended to be master. As Sauron suspected of all people who would oppose him, he would attempt to use the ring against Sauron and replace him, not destroy the ring to rid the world of evil. There was a problem though. It might be that he would need to get his hands on the One Ring itself to reverse engineer it. And as a master of ring lore, it is likely he knew that if he attempted to wield the One Ring, it might not serve him as it did Sauron. But in the time he had, the years, decades or centuries with which he had to inquire into the lore and the craft, certainly he would learn of Celebrimbor, the forging of the Rings of Power, and all that we would come to learn throughout the book. What is in the province of the wise would be something expected of Saruman to know, lest he be no longer counted among the wise. It is perhaps this egotism that drove Saruman astray. We know that from his time coming into the world, when Círdan gave the Ring of Fire to Gandalf, Saruman was furious and undoubtedly never forgot this slight on his person, his worthiness and his ability. At the time of the Lord of the Rings, when we first meet him, it is likely that he is already in a race against time to either acquire the ring by way of sending his own agents out of Orthanc to acquire it, as we know that there were the three groups of orcs that the three hunters pursued, those of Mordor, those of Isengard, and those unaffiliated orcs of Moria, who followed after the Fellowship to avenge the death of their chieftain, who was killed by a member of the Fellowship. With the orcs of Isengard wanting to return them to Saruman, the orcs of Mordor obviously wanted to return them to Mordor, to Sauron. The unaffiliated orcs were just in a blood feud with the Fellowship and had little concern about rings, only the blood of their enemies to avenge their fallen comrade. Interestingly, in this scenario of a Maya and a member of the Astari, only this one group of orcs acted selflessly and noble among those three groups. When the orcs are the high-minded group in any party, something has gone horribly wrong. This brings us back to what is one of the central thematic elements of The Lord of the Rings, and a thematic thread which runs through the whole of the work. The ambitious and selfish are doomed to fail because they will be blinded by their ego, by their ambitions, and lose objectivity of thought and become blinded to the dangers and the risk of what they seek. Again and again, what is meant to empower someone is often what becomes their prison. As the 9 mortal men who wasted away and became wraiths, their pursuit of power drained them of life entirely, to the point they only hold shape by covering their fell spirits in black cloaks. The Tower of Isengard itself, bequeathed to Saruman as an ally by the Steward Beren, first became a symbol of strength and fortification, and at the story's end, the Ents have Saruman trapped within those very walls. And what's worse, he's stuck inside with Grima Wormtongue, and since Grima threw the Palantiri out of the window trying to strike Gandalf, he has no one else to talk to, though he eventually gets to leave, only to later meet his end by Wormtongue's blade. What power he sought that was beyond his nature sent him down a path of corruption, blackening his soul and stripping him of any right to the position which was conferred upon him. Just as the Silmarils were so hotly pursued by the Sons of Fëanor, they had done so much evil in their pursuit that when they finally acquired the Hallowed Gems, they burned their hands. The wickedness of their deeds in seeking the Silmarils made them unworthy of possessing them. So it is with Saruman, the wickedness of his pursuit made him unworthy of his position, and when his body burned away and turned to ash, scattering in the wind, we see the end to all such missions in Middle-earth, because in this world it is so ordered by Eru Ilúvatar that despite the presence of evil, goodness will prevail. Saruman was a spiteful, grudge-bearing and deeply envious being. His pursuit of the ring was purely for his own purposes, to make himself master of Middle-earth, to supplant Sauron by using the One Ring, or one like it, against the Dark Lord so that he could take his place. Unlike Galadriel, who was able to resist the temptation of the ring when Frodo offered it to her, Saruman would not need to be asked twice. And for that, he will always be, as Maglor and Maithros and the Silmarils, unworthy of that which he sought, because the actions necessary to acquire their ends rendered it impossible for them to ever achieve it. So there we have it, Saruman the White, Saruman of many colours, a powerful being whose greed blinded him to the evil of his deeds. What might have been had he acquired the One Ring we will never know, but it is likely that he would have become a thrall of Sauron, just as we see over and over again. The source of what he believed to be ultimate power would, in this instance, become his ultimate prison. He became a master of ring lore, almost unmatched in his knowledge of a potential powerful and deadly craft. There may have been a ring of Isengard, but that is referring to the stone wall around the area that holds Orthanc. However, Saruman was still proud enough to call himself Ringmaker. Even he wasn't on the level of Sauron, at least not by the time of the War of the Ring. Who knows how far he could have gone had he never been defeated. So with that comes my question of the day. What do you think would have happened if Saruman was never defeated? How would the story have changed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Time has come, as always, to thank our patrons. You guys are supporting our film project. We are making progress. We're getting there, slowly but surely, and we cannot thank you enough. We have the Divine Power tier members, Kevin and Abram, the Fire Demon tier members, Nashith and Gregory, and the Wizards staff tier members, John, Andrew, Jennifer, Hunter, and David. You're all true legends of the Brohirrim. Finally, if you've managed to reach the end of this video with me today, first of all, thank you very much, but I'd like to remind you to make sure you hit that like and subscribe button for more Middle-earth content. Thank you all so much for spending some time with me here today. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.